Just a few announcements. Yesterday, really vibrant poster session and student showcase, a lot of energy if you walk through all the content, the innovation that's happening. There was a competition for the student showcase, so I just wanted to announce the winners here. They're already awarded last night, but just wanted to share the 3 winners. We had the one of this ergonomic vacuum scope for enhanced transurethral bladder tumor resection. That was the grand prize. And then second place was the reel for reeling in IV dislodgement through safer tangle-free mobility. And then the third place was secure, man, all these difficult words, huh? Nasogastric unit for growth, snug. I'll just say snug. Okay, so congratulations to them. Let's give a round of applause. And if you are a company out there and want to sponsor so we can give nice prizes to these winners, please don't hesitate next year. So we also have, please don't miss it, the second half of the poster session, 3 to 6, and there will be a reception with food from 5 to 6, and there'll be a lot of last-minute networking and learning and innovation going on, so please don't miss that. We also have our 5-minute pitch competition. We had nearly 100 pretty amazing submissions, pitch decks, and our judges, who you'll see during that session afternoon, narrowed it down to 8. And the 8 that are going to be competing for 2 prizes, one for $5,000 and the other one, I believe, is $2,500, sponsored by Avio and also Bakken Medical Devices Center. And these are the 8 that are going to be competing for the competition. So there'll be two winning spots. So come attend that in the afternoon. The last thing is there's going to be guided tours. If you missed it yesterday, the Visible Heart Lab, if you're interested, just go to the registration desk. The last thing I'll pitch here is just we have an Innovation Fellows program. Many entrepreneurs, innovators out there, we go through a formal process. Our director, Danny Sachs, is right here, not to embarrass him. He's facing all of you, actually, and not facing me, but he's facing all of you. No. He runs this amazing program where we have about 10 individuals usually. They come in and they go through a needs assessment, learn all the aspects they need for building an idea and concept to then, with many of them, eventually either an IP or evolving into a startup. So it's a great opportunity to learn. And then we have other programs in the pipeline to enable those startups to get to a de-risk stage for fundraising. So if you're interested, applications are due by May 18th. So just wanted to shameless plug there. So with that, I'm going to hand over to the Institute for Engineering Medicine Director, Dr. John Bischof, who's going to say a few things and then introduce our wonderful keynote speaker today for the lunch.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. It's really delightful to see everybody here, really filling this wonderful space that we have here at the McNamara for the 25th Annual Design of Medical Devices meeting. And I'm standing between you and a wonderful speaker, Michelle Tarver, but I wanted to unveil one of our big secrets here at the University of Minnesota, which is the Institute for Engineering and Medicine. So everybody's heard of the Bakken Medical Device Center, and everybody's heard of the Visible Heart Lab, so I'm just going to take a few minutes to tell you about the umbrella organization that was actually built out of a philanthropic endowment campaign from the local industry back in the 90s, and that is the Institute for Engineering and Medicine. So if I can figure this out. All right, so we're a catalyst, a connector, and a collaborator, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of our programs in workforce development, some innovation centers, and VHL and BMDC are part of that, but there are more, and then some of the partnerships that we have and the engagements that we have, including this wonderful meeting and many relationships that we built over the years with many of our local and national companies. So clinical immersion in the workforce space is something that we're really, really proud of. This is something that Paul and Ken Rosen, Paul Izio and Ken Rosen run with the participation of many, I think it's more than 20 of our medical school departments participate in this. We embed local as well as national and even international companies into surgical subspecialties and other clinical environments for up to a week. They can innovate on the fly. It's a very confidential but deep look into what's going on in the clinical environment, which is really, really useful for engineers that are out there in industry. And the beautiful piece of this is it's not only good for the industry, but the money that comes in from the program goes back to help fund the residents of these different departments. And so everybody wins in this great example of a quite unique workforce immersion program. If you are not aware of the cardiac short course, you might want to take a peek. This is something that also has been going on for something like 25 years. Paul started this, IZO again, back when the physiology department was just getting started, and now it's become a huge success. We have over 160 participants every year. They end up going for a whole week and learning a tremendous amount of information about the cardiac system. We also had the innovation workshop on Monday. Many of you may have at least seen that on the agenda. And then there are more courses that are coming. Advanced cardiac electrophysiology, there's a neuro course, and there's more courses that are constantly being added to this portfolio. I would encourage you all to consider looking at one of these and possibly taking. So we have centers, and the Bakken Medical Device Center is a very important part of this. The inaugural leader of this, the director, Art Erdman, was on stage yesterday talking about how this conference got started. It's sort of synergistically with the Bakken Medical Device Center some 25 years ago. And Hubert is the director of that. Danny, you heard about, is running the Innovation Fellows Program, and they do a lot of other work in the entrepreneurship space. Hubert's looking to build an Endure program, which can actually dock in small companies so that we can actually help with small company and startup, basically accelerate them here in the Twin Cities. So we would have large companies, but we'd also have a lot more of the young startups coming out of the university, but also from the community taking advantage of the amazing resources we have here at this Tier 1 research institution. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Medtronic's largest academic contract in the world, which is the Visible Heart Lab that Paul Izio runs. This has also been going on for more than 25 years, and this is a source of amazing translational research. Paul has told me that basically every cardiac device out there in the world today has been broken at least once by him. And now it's also a great training program for many clinicians, not only here locally, but also nationally and internationally. Finally, we also have been creating centers, and so this is a center I run, and I'm really proud of it. This is Advanced Technologies for the Preservation of Biological Systems. It's an NSF Engineering Research Center grant. It's the largest grant given in the field of cryobiology. If you're interested, we actually embedded our annual meeting in this meeting. So we actually have a cardiac, sort of a neural medical device track, and then we have a cryopreservation track for the first time in this meeting. Encourage those of you that have interest to come by the Heritage Room and visit with us. We also have an industry advisory board. You see some of the bigger names here in the Twin Cities, and we are engaging as a matter of partnership with them, but also with all of you that are part of this conference, and we encourage you to reach out if there are things that we can do to help connect you with researchers and resources on the Twin Cities campus. And finally, we will have a neuromodulation symposium, which has also been going on for a number of years. And this, we made a strategic decision to actually separate the Design of Medical Devices meeting and the Neuromod. So this will be offered in October in the fall, so stay tuned. This is another high-impact, wonderful course that we can offer to you. So that is all I have to say about IEM, but now I would like to introduce our speaker. All right, so it's really an honor for me to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Michelle Tarver. She's a visionary leader who sits at the intersection of clinical excellence, rigorous science, and regulatory innovation. As the director of the FDA's Center for Devices in Radiological Health, or CDRH, Dr. Tarver oversees the safety and effectiveness of the medical technologies that shape our world. With over 15 years of experience as a medical device regulator, she has been a primary catalyst for changing organizational culture and driving strategic initiatives, most recently as the Deputy Center Director for Transformation. Dr. Tarver's credentials are as deep as they are diverse. She is a board-certified ophthalmologist with a doctorate in epidemiology. She completed her MD and PhD at the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine and the Bloomberg School of Public Health after earning a degree in biochemistry from Spelman. Beyond her policy and leadership roles, she remains a dedicated clinician, continuing to treat patients with inflammatory eye conditions. Please join me in welcoming a true champion for patient-centered design and evidence-based innovation, Dr. Michelle Tarver. Thank you, Michelle.
So I'm not as tall, so I had to take the short route. Sorry about that. All right, well, thank you all very much. I really do appreciate the opportunity to join you. Thank you, Dr. Lim, Dr. Bischof, for the very kind introduction. You know, I am delighted that I got a warm welcome here because I was really worried about the snow you all had earlier this week, and it's just been lovely since I've been here, so thank you. I also want to applaud the work that you all are doing here at the University of Minnesota. The work to help advance the design of medical devices that actually impact and improve patient care. And to begin with, I'd like to ground you in the vision that we have at the Center for Devices in Radiological Health. And that vision is that patients in the U.S. have access to timely access to high-quality, safe, and effective medical devices that promote and protect their health and well-being. Now, there are three things in our mission and our vision statement that are important. The first is that it starts and ends with patients. That's what we all should be focused on when we're designing products, when we're making authorization decisions, and when we implement them into care paradigms. The second part of the vision statement that I'd like to call your attention to is the importance of high quality, safe, and effective. People have to know that the devices that are being used on them are of good quality, that they work the way they're supposed to work, and they don't have to worry about being harmed from them. That is critical to trust, implementation, and adoption. So that's the second principle. The third is time. When you're talking about a medical device and you're talking about people living with a significant health condition or dealing with an acute critical health condition, minutes, seconds, hours, months, years matter. And so we owe it to them to make rapid innovation, but do it responsibly. I want to share with you what we've been doing at the center to move this mission and vision forward. Since 1976, the medical device amendments laid the foundation for how we regulate medical devices in the United States. So this is the 50th anniversary. We've been doing this for 50 years in a structured way. And since then, we have over 260,000 unique medical devices that are on the US marketplace that we regulate. They are made by over 25,000 manufacturing firms that we have to oversee. Last year alone, to talk about the pace of innovation, we received over 20,000 submissions. 20,000, it's a lot, considering that there's less than 2,000 people working at CDRH. So we are busy. We're busy and we're on task to help move innovation forward. The other thing that I would like to call your attention to is that as we move things forward, we're doing specific activities with respect to novel technologies. Last year, we authorized over 124 novel medical devices in the United States. That's one of the highest numbers we've had in the 50 years we've been in business. That's a lot, and we only expect that number to continue to climb. But it requires, in order for it to climb, for us to do appropriate regulatory oversight, right-sized, right-scaled, and help to cultivate the pipeline of innovative products that will meet the needs of the U.S. public. Now, I told you that everything starts with patients because it ends with patients. And the only way that we can really bring their perspective, their ideas into the process is if we empower them to be contributors. And some of the ways in which we do that is by fostering active patient engagement. We've got a number of mechanisms at the agency that help patients provide us their perspectives on their health conditions and the devices that are used in their care. And I will tell you, patients have incredible insights. They are very informed, and we just have to take the time to listen to them. We've got a couple of programs where patients have told us that the way that this device is designed doesn't work because a manifestation of my disease impacts my ability to actually touch the screen. Well, it would have been helpful for the developer to know that before they launched their product and made it accessible with their disease in mind. So those are the kinds of things you can learn from patients, and we're listening to them. We also know that there's a way for patients to give us a perspective on how they look at the benefit risk for a particular treatment, for one treatment, and weigh it against the treatment, another treatment, and how do they make that choice? What's most important in driving those choices? That's called patient preference studies. And there's methodology in place to help us understand that. And we use it as valid scientific evidence in our decision making. So we just published a guidance late last month, end of March, on patient preferences and how it's used not just in our benefit risk decision making, but also how can it be used to help select the performance goal for a particular endpoint. Maybe helping to select which endpoints you need to measure in your trial. So those are really important applications. I encourage you to look at that guidance document if you haven't seen it yet. It's also important that we look at the patient's experience when they're actually in a clinical study getting a particular medical device. And the way that we usually do that is through patient-reported outcome measures. Now, these are not anecdotal reports that a patient tells us, but they are structured collections of information that are collected in a standardized format and can be aggregated, summarized, and used to inform the outcome of that particular device in the trial. These patient-reported outcomes are increasingly being included in our submissions with clinical data. In fact, over 50% of our submissions have a patient-reported outcome measure in it, if they have a clinical study. The reason why this is important is because at the end of the day, your device has to be able to be communicated, the benefits of your device has to be able to be communicated to the patient by a provider. And the things they care about are often in that patient-reported outcome measure. So we are seeing companies increasingly include them in studies. And the last thing that I want to talk about empowering patients is patients are wearing all kinds of devices, wearables, all kinds of things in their home that are measuring how they are feeling and functioning. And that information, that data exhaust, can be incredibly useful in understanding how your device is performing. So that patient-generated health data is increasingly being included not only in trials, but also included in post-market activities. So patients are powerful agents in the data that's driving our decisions. I want to touch on a couple of the tools that patient data can actually help us with. I'm going to start first with the medical device development tools. Now, these are tools that have been qualified for a particular context of use, and what it means for the developer is the agency's already looked at it. We've seen all the different evidence that supports that measurement tool for a particular outcome or a particular development part of the cycle, and we don't need to see you prove it to us again, as long as you're using it in the way that we qualified it for. We've got about 21 qualified MDDTs. Of them, a number of them are patient-reported outcome measures, so that you don't have to develop it, because if you don't know, I can tell you patient-reported outcome measures cost millions and millions of dollars to develop and to validate. So we've got about 21 of them. Those tools have paid off dividends. Currently, they're used in about 1,100 or more submissions. That's a lot for 21 to inform over 1,000 submissions. Now, there are also regulatory science tools. Now, they haven't undergone the same rigor that a medical device development tool has. However, they're a good starting point so that you don't have to start with blue sky necessarily when you're trying to figure out, how do I show this or how do I prove that? The agency has given you a tool that you can start with. You can look and see, does it work for your particular device, and then include that in the submission. And you're seeing we've got 150 of those regulatory science tools on our website, and they have been used in over 900 pre-market submissions. That's work that you all don't have to do as developers. Now, I will tell you, these tools don't all come from industry. In fact, the FDA has created some of these tools, and academics have created others. So it's a really good opportunity for you to think about what's missing in this development cycle and how can we contribute to developing tools that can help facilitate innovation coming to market. Now, I mentioned academia, I mentioned industry, I mentioned patients. What we recognize is that all the great ideas don't rest in one particular siloed entity or stakeholder. The FDA doesn't have all the answers to every element of healthcare, and I'm sure that's no surprise to any of you. And I know that there's hospital systems that don't have the answer to every single challenge. But when we all work together to solve those particular challenges, we can develop solutions that are implementable and adopted. One of the things that we found is FDA has seen challenges where the regulatory part is just one small part of that challenge. I'll give you an example. Wound care. Wound care has a lot of challenges. It accounts for so many causes of morbidity in our population, and it's only rising. But we don't necessarily have great solutions for measuring when is a wound healed, unless it's completely healed, right? So if you're doing a clinical trial, what's a good endpoint for wound healing? That's a question that not only do the regulators have, but the clinicians have, the patients have. How do we deliver it more effectively at home? That's not a regulatory question. That's a clinical care question. What wound care devices are actually going to work best for me? That's a patient question, not a regulatory question. And so having this grassroots movement where folks say, this is a challenge we have, can we all solve it together? FDA has said if you put a community together, we'll look at that community, and if it aligns with our resources and our priorities, we may participate as a member, a full active member of that collaborative community. Currently, we've got about 17 collaborative communities in a lot of areas, including brain-computer interface, ophthalmic innovation, just to name a few. And so I encourage you to take a look at our collaborative community page, see some of the communities that are there, and see whether that's something you would like to participate in, because we all need to be part of the solutions. Now, I talked about the importance of novel technologies, and there's a couple of programs that we have put in place in the agency to help foster novel technologies. One of them is the Breakthrough Devices Program. This program is voluntary. It's for certain medical devices and device-led combination products that lead to a more effective treatment or diagnosis of life-threatening or irreversibly debilitating conditions. The Breakthrough Device Program actually came about during the 21st Century Cures Act. And one of the important things is that once we put this in place, because it was really to fill unmet needs, we wanted innovation where we didn't have solutions. Since the program started, we've had over 1,252 breakthrough designations, and that's of March of this year. That's how many we've had. And it's translated to about 15% of authorizations. 15% of those have had authorization. So it really is leading to novel technologies coming to market. However, you heard 1,200 designated, 15% authorized. There's a big gap there. And I'm going to talk about some of the solutions we've put in place to try to help address that gap. The STEP program, also called the Safer Technologies Program, is for devices that don't quite meet the bar for breakthrough, but they are also making changes that improve the safety of a particular device that is addressing conditions that are less serious. We have a number of different products in this pipeline as well. Now, innovation is a priority. You've heard me say it a lot of times. It's because it's a huge focus of our center. And innovation is explosive in the area of digital health technologies. We have a Digital Health Center of Excellence, and our director, Dr. Rick Abramson, some of you might have met him yesterday, newly, 2 months in the role, is working to help advance the policy that we have with respect to software that's in or as a medical device, artificial intelligence-enabled technology, sensor-based technologies, as well as thinking about it across different product types too. The Digital Health Center of Excellence sets the bar not only for our center, but is often the source of information for other centers at the agency, as well as across the department. We recognized as part of this effort that there are a number of different digital health developers, digital health technology developers, who are not traditional medical device companies. They come from big tech, and they have no idea how to navigate the regulatory landscape. We recognized that and tried to meet them where they were, and so we created a number of resources. One of them is the Regulatory Accelerator. This is really three parts. First, it's curated a lot of resources that are available so that the innovator community, who may be less familiar with medical device regulation, can figure out and answer the questions that they may have so they can be better prepared when they engage with us. We also have encouraged them to do an early orientation meeting with us. This is a way for them to show us their new technology. We can answer questions. It's more like a show and tell. We can ask questions, they can answer it, and so when the submission comes to us, there's less lingering questions, and we can focus on really the important things that are going to impact our benefit risk decision. And the third element of this regulatory accelerator is really to help organize some of the guidances that are around how software is evaluated at the agency. The reason why this is really important is that it can get really complicated quickly, and you should know as you're planning your development, what is the agency going to be looking for when you're going to submit to us, so you can invest in generating the evidence that's needed early on before you submit to us. Now I'm going to shift gears a little bit and I talked about innovation, I talked about cultivating the pipeline, I talked about some of the elements we've put in place. Now I'm going to talk about the merge between what happens after it leaves the regulatory space and how does it navigate the payment space. We have been working collaboratively with our colleagues at the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services for many years. And recently, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Innovation launched the Access Program. Now, the Access Program was recognizing that there are many people in this country who really need digital health technologies in order to manage and monitor their chronic care because they weren't able to get in with their providers, and it was going to be a challenge. And so they issued this program last December. I think April 1st, they announced some of the early entrants to this program, but we heard this program, we said there's a gap here. There are a number of digital health technologies that are not on label to be able to make these clinical care outcome claims that you're going to want to reimburse. So let's work together. We put together the Technology-Enabled Meaningful Patient Outcomes Program, TEMPO. We're a federal agency. We got a whole lot of acronyms, so please forgive me. I'm going to use them, but I think I have it up there spelled out. So TEMPO is designed to say we're going to have some regulatory enforcement relaxation of certain elements of what's required for you to have something on the market, as long as you come to us first with a letter of interest that you're willing to participate in the TEMPO pilot. There's 4 different areas that align with the Access Program areas, and it's early cardiometabolic, so think pre-diabetes, cardiometabolic, which is hypertension and diabetes. If you think about behavioral health, it's anxiety and depression, and then musculoskeletal, which is largely chronic pain, back pain. If you're in one of those 4 areas and you've got a digital health technology and you're participating in Access, then we want you to ask for participation in TEMPO, and we're going to say that you're going to be able to participate in Access, meaning you can market your device to those Medicare Part B providers' patients with some caveats. So you're going to give us the real-world data on how your device is performing in that patient population. We want to see the clinical outcomes, and that'll help inform our regulatory decision. This is a regulatory sandbox, and my lawyers would probably be very upset that I use that term, but I'm going to just say it is a flexibility that we're exerting here because we want to see how do we help push the envelope with respect to innovation, but responsibly put safeguards in place that protect patients. This program is open. We have a number of entrants already, people who have requested participation, and I encourage it's not closed. So if people are interested, please visit our website. The other thing that is really important is, you know, there are a number of different innovations that I've talked about in terms of facilitating the pipeline, but there's also efficiencies that industry can use and leverage, and one of them is the ASCA program. It's the accreditation scheme for conformity assessment. This program is a little different than some of our, you can think of it kind of as being analogous to standards. It is a way of putting in place accredited laboratories to do certain parts of your testing. We recognize them so that if you put a summary test report of what this lab gave you in your submission, we're not going to probably question it. And in fact, we have evidence to support that. In fact, 3% of applications that have had these summary test reports got additional questions. That's not a lot, considering that if you don't use it, we may have a lot of questions. And so we are encouraging companies to please use this process because we have some assurance of the quality of the data that comes from these test labs. You're seeing that there's traction already, and we're encouraging companies to try to use these processes more because it creates efficiency not only for you, but also for the agency. Now, how do we put it all together? I talked about some pre-market tools. I talked about post-market tools that we're putting in place. The TAP program, the total product life cycle, which is how we talk about medical devices, is the way we put it all together. This program came out of our medical device user fee 5 commitment, which stated, we understand that many of these innovators have a great idea, but they never see the light of day when it comes to the U.S. marketplace. And why is that? Sometimes it's not getting through the regulator. It's getting clinicians to adopt and implement it. It's for patients to want the device to be used on them. And it's for payers to want to cover and reimburse it. So we said, we're going to try to help this pipeline. The TAP program, and you probably have met some of the TAP advisors in the audience today, but the TAP program is designed to bring the evidence you're going to need to convince all the other stakeholders, in addition to the regulator, online sooner. The program has a list of patient organizations who've raised their hands and said, we're willing to help industry, give them insights about their particular devices if it's about our medical condition. And we've got them listed on our website. We've got providers who said, we're willing to help developers and give them insights about our clinical workflows, some of the important questions and outcomes that should be assessed. And they're listed on our website. And we're willing to make those connections for you all. The last thing is that there's payers. And so we work with federal payers, but also private payers, and get insights to what kind of things, what kind of outcomes are they looking for, what kind of patient populations would need to be studied to support a coverage or a reimbursement decision by them. And we have worked with the TAP companies to let them know those insights. So you can imagine what a time savings it is when you've got predictability in terms of what may be things that are not going to work for that particular clinical question and things that will work. And so we are encouraging breakthrough device companies that meet the criteria for TAP, and we just are expanding that to include other areas. If you look on our website on May 1st, and almost has every clinical area covered already. We encourage people to take a look, and TAP is a voluntary program, so you have to say, I want to be in TAP. And I will tell you that the companies that have participated, 98% of them have said it's been phenomenal. Many of them have gotten to market sooner than they had planned for and anticipated. And have gotten coverage decisions earlier too. So I think that that's an important lesson for people to think about holistically. What's your development plan for your particular device? And this program has been successful at doing that. Now this is going to bring me to our last topic that we are focused on in the agency, and it's about bringing healthcare into the home. If you read the news, if you're looking at any publication, you know that chronic disease rates in the United States are through the roof. In fact, 40% of adults have a chronic disease. For children, 1 in 5 have a chronic condition. You also can look at the rates of clinical providers. We have fewer and fewer specialists. We have fewer and fewer people remaining in clinical care. We've got a retirement pipeline that's accelerating at a pace that outpaces our replacement pipeline for clinicians. And we are seeing hospitals close across America. We're seeing clinics be acquired, consolidated, or closed. This is a real problem that we're going to have in terms of managing and monitoring those health conditions and ensuring that people are not presenting to us when we don't have as many options available to reverse it. This initiative is focused on how do we get ahead of this, how do we avert the tidal wave that's coming, and be prepared to help deliver care into the home so that people can manage their condition at home in a way that is non-disruptive, can be seamlessly integrated into their daily lives, and can give the information that healthcare providers need to know when they need to know it in a way that can improve healthcare outcomes. That's what bore this initiative. And when we talk to patients, because we do talk to patients quite a bit, they said, okay, that's a great idea, but what do you know about our homes? You say you're designing for my home. Do you know anything about it? And we realized we didn't. We thought about our homes, but not necessarily about the range of homes that people are going to have to move care into. And so we partnered with an architectural firm who developed different virtual reality prototypes of homes. And this was a team, a steering committee of occupational therapists, physicians, industry, payers, consumer tech, all came together around a table and talked about some of the challenges they saw here. We focused on diabetes initially because we knew that that was a common condition. It accounts for a significant cost to the healthcare system and has significant morbidities, impacts children and adults. And so we created these prototypes because we thought it was important for developers to begin an empathy tour. If they don't know patients who live in these places, they need to see it. They need to understand what they're designing for and make sure that you right-size your technology. And I'll give you an example of one challenge we saw. There was a home hemodialysis device. We've authorized some home hemodialysis devices. Well, when we saw that device with all the equipment, the reusables, the supplies that have to be used within a 2-week period by somebody who's dialyzing at home, it took up their entire living room if you have a small footprint home. So I've taken the option of home dialysis off the table for them. How do we design better so that more people can take advantage of those technologies and be liberated from having to be at a clinic 3 days a week for the rest of their lives? That's what this effort was about, and we're expanding on it. We've got a challenge that we just announced at the beginning of April. It's called the Ready Innovation Challenge, and what this challenge acknowledges is that hospital readmission rates within the first 30 days range between 10 to 30% for most people. That's high. That counts for $20 billion of healthcare costs and significant morbidity and mortality for patients that have to be readmitted. And it's often not for the initial reason for why they were hospitalized. So we've got to do better as a society, as a healthcare ecosystem. We've got to do better. This challenge is asking companies that are developing devices that will help people care for themselves at home, submit to us. We're willing to do sprint interactions with you, meaning that you're going to get a lot of high touch from the agency. We want to facilitate those devices moving through the process, but we want to make sure we have the right evidence to inform it, and we are assuring that there's safety and effectiveness of that device. So please visit our website. The challenge is open. There's 2 phases to it, and I encourage, if you are developing something in this space, to take a look. Now, how do we get all this work done? We get it done through the medical device user fee amendments, and this is a commitment. It's a partnership with industry and government to get certain things done. Some of them are performance goals, some of them are new initiatives, like you heard about digital health and other things. These combined resources are how we get there. We are in the process of renegotiating the 6th version of the amendments, the MDUFA reauthorization process, and I want to share that we have meeting minutes that are up and publicly available. As part of this process, we don't just talk to industry, but we also talk to other stakeholders, professional organizations, patient organizations. All of them have input into what we put on the table during this negotiation process. We are at a stage now, and we are well ahead of our typical schedule, where we have a proposal that is we have an agreed upon proposal in principle at the current time. So that's really exciting, and we're hoping to have a public meeting sometime this summer. So resources is one thing, people is another thing. That's how we get the work done, and we are hiring. I don't know if you've seen on USA Jobs, we've got a number of different positions listed, a lot of specialties you can see in here on the slide. We are looking for folks who want to be as mission-focused as we are, who are working to help advance public health and want to learn how to right-size science and regulatory approach, because we don't ask the questions that make us curious necessarily. We're asking the questions that we need to know to ensure that a device is safe and effective. So if you've got folks who are interested, we're taking people straight out of college all the way to people who may be very seasoned in their career. Send us a CV to this mailbox. So to conclude, as I said, the medical device ecosystem is evolving rapidly. Whether we're talking about artificial intelligence, digital health, care in the home, people deserve timely access to safe and effective and high-quality devices that are supported by strong scientific evidence. We really do appreciate the partnership of academic centers, such as your center, and we are really happy that all of you are here today because it shows that you're interested in the same thing we are in helping to advance the health of the nation. So thank you. Sure, I'll take any questions if you all would like to ask questions, and I see one right here in the second table.
Thank you so much for such a great presentation, and your predecessor, Jeff Shuren, stood in your spot there twice over the years, and it was a great relationship. In fact, building from that, a number of us got invited out to your fantastic labs just outside of DC. You mentioned on your last slide looking for people. So, I mean, it's pretty phenomenal, the type of people you have in the both computational, experimental, and testing labs that you have. My question is, with the move towards both digital health, AI, and in-home focus, is that changing what you have in your labs as far as equipment and also the people that you're hiring?
So we're always trying to anticipate where is the technology going. You know, we obviously want a solution for right now, but also where's it going? And we have increasingly been hiring people who've got unique talent. So they may have a clinical background and a big data analytics background, right? We're increasingly seeing that diversity in the resumes that we're receiving. And we are hiring people who have multiple skill sets. We're also upskilling people who already may have one skill set and helping them to learn and grow as the technology grows. So it's a two-pronged approach. You are absolutely welcome to come visit us in the Silver Spring area and see our labs, because we do have new computational modeling, a lot of artificial intelligence-enabled work happening in our laboratories right now.
So, my name is Ibrahim Badejo. Thanks for the wonderful presentation. You know, with some of these, there are some diseases that are really prevalent among, in our community. What I mean by community, people of color. I mean, high rate of diabetes, high rate of hypertension, and in many cases, the clinical trials doesn't really encompass or make sure that is fully included. And we saw this situation with COVID. But with the recent change or wave in the federal government, I hate to use the word, doing away with DEI, doing away with trying to call out societies or individuals. How is FDA trying to address those so that we're actually developing solutions that can truly work, not just for one segment of the society, but for the entire public?
So, I mean, I think you've heard us say that we are committed to gold standard science. We are committed to ensuring we have the evidence we need to make an informed regulatory decision, and that the indication for use should reflect the population, and so your data should reflect the population in which your device is going to be used. If there is a plausible reason why you think something may need to have additional information in certain populations, you should supplement it. For example, if you think pigment is going to affect the performance of light-based technologies, then we should see something that looks at the pigment and is reflective of the spectrum of pigment in which you expect that particular device to work. We saw that with respect to pulse oximeters. I do think that there is an important point that you've heard the department be very vocal about, which is that we would want to make sure that people, regardless of zip code, have access to these technologies. And so we are very much focused on making sure that that happens as an agency.
I shouldn't ask questions because I should give everybody else a chance, but I did want to ask one question. First of all, wonderful talk, and the Tempo program, the Ready Innovation Challenge, at Home Innovation Challenge. I wasn't aware of those, so those are excellent and very innovative for the agency. The last point you made about hiring, this is something as an educator, biomedical engineering department, we're always looking to see how do we train the next generation of these innovators coming out. And FDA hasn't really registered, for example, in our department, as a core avenue, but it should be. And so I just was wondering if you had examples of universities or programs that have tried to integrate more FDA regulatory types of aspects that have actually enabled more students to be coming into FDA and other kinds of agencies, because that is something that I think would be very exciting and interesting for a lot of our students. And I'm sure you saw when you mentioned that a lot of people were taking pictures because they're very intrigued by coming to FDA. So maybe you can make a comment if there are examples, or if not, what could be things added to the programs?
So I'm going to start first by saying FDA was not even on my radar as a career. So I think I'm very similar to many of you. It wasn't what I was even thinking about going into. I will say that awareness is one first big step, that what kind of talent we are looking for, and folks can then see themselves, obviously, in that. I'm increasingly seeing universities incorporate a regulatory science track, degrees, programs, because they're recognizing that if they're going to invest in the intellectual property and the development of intellectual property that may need to interface with the regulator, they kind of have to know what the regulators are looking for. And so they're training folks to think about it. And so I've increasingly have been surprised by clinicians who've come up to me and said, I'm working on this and I think I want to be part of the FDA team because I really am enjoying my project that's focused on regulatory science. So I do think that there's an important component to familiarizing people, regardless of whether you're going into industry, whether you're going to start your own startup, you still need to know what are the considerations if I'm looking at market access for my technology that's going to come through the medtech pipeline. And so those considerations are important early on. For example, if you're developing a device, do you have good design control files? Are you keeping good track of that? Because that's going to make you attractive or not attractive to a particular acquisition. Or if you're trying to come to the FDA, I'm going to be concerned if you don't have good files about other problems with your risk management system. So I think that there's important considerations there that it'd be helpful for everyone to appreciate early on. So I encourage, I thank you for planting the seed for you all to also think about ways in which to help cultivate that pipeline. I think it could be very useful. And we also at FDA have many programs for interns, for people who are doing postdoc type of work. We have an Office of Science and Engineering laboratories where we have many, many, many people that come through and learn some of the considerations. While you don't look at the files, you start to hear the considerations of regulators and see where there's unmet need, where there's opportunities to develop tools and research approaches that might help facilitate medtech development.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Tarver. I wonder if you could update us on any discussions that are going on with aligning medical device regulations globally, and particularly between the United States and Europe now that all med tech companies are sort of undergoing a whiplash effect having to do with the changes in European regulations.
So we work very actively with the International Medical Device Regulators Forum, which is a collection of regulators from across the globe. We've got participation from the EU, the European Commission. We've got MHRA, which is the United Kingdom's regulatory body, Canada, TGA, which is Australia's regulatory body, as well as Singapore and China, Russia, South Korea, as well as Brazil and some of the Southern Hemisphere regulators. So we really do have a lot of folks that are participating in that, and it really is a forum where we talk about ways in which we can harmonize on regulatory expectations, understanding that companies do not just market in one particular market. They're often looking for a global reach, and the more consistency they have with one regulator to the other, it can create some efficiencies in their planning. And when there are totally different expectations, it makes it very hard for a company to scale to those other arenas. So we have been working collaboratively. We just put forward our Reliance playbook, and I encourage folks, if you haven't seen it, it's a way in which we are trying to encourage a reliance approach, which also requires harmonization for us to get there. We're working with a lot of the emerging regulators who may be just starting, but particularly in places in, excuse me, in Africa, we know, and in some of the South American countries where they're just starting their regulatory approach, and we are helping to train them so that they don't reinvent the wheel, that they learn from the experience of regulators who've been doing it for quite a while. We also work with international standardizing bodies, understanding that standards can play a significant role in helping to create harmonization as well. We have a lot of standards, and in every little particular clinical space, device space. And so that is another way in which we try to lead to some harmonization, which will lead to some efficiencies. And one of the things that I would say is really important is we're looking for ways to bring clinical trials to the United States and have them start here, because I think it's very helpful if we see early on what you're developing in the pipeline. Years ago, and I would say probably over 15 years, many devices would start outside the United States and come in. We've seen a shift. In fact, over 60% of medical devices companies start here in the United States first. And that is really helpful because as we extend our reliance and harmonization approaches, others are going to be looking at the FDA's decision and may be able to leverage that. So we're encouraging and trying to find ways in which we can encourage the U.S. development first, or at least getting the U.S. insight on what a pivotal study would need to look like in order to get market authorization in the United States. It may create a lot of efficiencies for companies.
Just following up on that quickly, I'm here, Michelle,
Oh, okay.
sorry. Clinical trials and FDA 2.0. So NAMs, do you think NAMs are going to replace animal systems? I mean, they are, I guess, but to what extent? And then how does it change the landscape for you? How should we be thinking about this? Because it's a big change, and organoids are coming on the scene, but they're not, you talk about standardization. They're not standardized.
Right. Yeah, I think there's a strong push to use new alternative methods for looking at medical devices and drugs and other products, obviously. We have always taken a very strong approach to trying to minimize the number of animals that need to be used. You probably saw we recently, I think last year, we put out guidance around dental studies and how many animals, and we reduced the number of animals that need to be used in looking at certain dental implants. I think there is going to continue to be a strong push for that. We've got a number of computer simulations. The better data we have that can help create these simulated scenarios, the more we can decrease our reliance. But it also may be an important component of that is determining when do I need to answer a question that requires an animal model, and can I leverage existing knowledge that already answers that question. And we see that with biocompatibility testing. If you're thinking about pyrogen testing and other things, if it's a material that we know has got a long experience in a particular space and you're using that same one, do we need to have 100 animals to support the properties of that? Or if I know that it's a device that you're only going to get 3 of them in your lifetime, do I have to test 50? And so those are the questions we are actively asking right now to try to minimize the impact on the animals.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Tarver, for your talk. In the combination product space, is
Can
there...
I ask that you stand
Oh, yeah,
so
sure.
I can find... Thank you.
In the combination product space, are there any initiatives that CDRH is working on working with CDER on to promote innovation there?
So the Commissioner's National Priority Voucher Program, there's a number of different products in there that may have a companion diagnostic or a drug delivery device. We are working collaboratively with them on that, and so we are involved in that work. We're also looking, honestly, at process improvement for how we look at combination products. We are one agency, but we sit in different centers. And so how do we bring all the important voices to the table earlier. We have taken the lead in working with our colleagues at the Center for Biologics and the Center for Drugs in figuring out how can we collaborate earlier so that companies can have greater predictability on the questions we're going to ask earlier, so that it's not a frantic race at the very end to try to figure out how to address those concerns. The other thing we're also looking at doing differently is encouraging industry to have both parties when they meet with the agency. What we see happen is that the drug or biologic company will not invite the companion diagnostic company, and that creates a problem because they don't get to hear the feedback. And so there's going to need to be collaboration on both sides of that table in order for us to improve that process, and that's what we're working to try to encourage.
Any more questions out there?
One question about the breakthrough device designation. That's kind of been like a badge of honor, I think, for some companies with their product to gain breakthrough designation. What is kind of your benchmark of success? You say the number is right now 15%. Where do you want it to be? What does success look like to the FDA for that program?
So my benchmark of success is that these breakthrough technologies actually get integrated into care and really improve people's healthcare outcomes. That's my benchmark of success. That's the whole reason for the program. I think we're just at the very beginning of starting to see that happen. And so for us within TAP, we'd like to see companies get the feedback they need so that they're cutting down the time for them to generate the evidence they need to meet all the different players. Not necessarily the regulatory time, because I think many people would agree that the regulatory time is not the challenge, that we are giving pretty relevant feedback in a timely manner. It's all the other players' feedback. And so we're looking at that, and that's some of the things we're considering as we look at ways to improve that. Now that's within TAP. One of the other things I think success would look like is helping those companies who have a breakthrough designation know when and what to ask the agency before they embark on their evidence collection. We often see companies that will start a clinical study. Let's say it's a non-significant risk study, right? And they start their clinical study, but they're not collecting the data that's going to answer the question that would inform our regulatory decision. Well, now you've invested a lot of resources to collect a lot of data that doesn't help you get through the first fence. And so what I would encourage is companies to take the time, think holistically about where they're really trying to go, and then develop and ask the questions of the agency earlier. But not questions that you can find easily on the website. I encourage you to look at our website. There's a lot of resources there, and leverage that. That's why we put it there. But ask those questions that you can't find an answer to, but you really need to know in order to help move your development process forward.
Okay, I'm going to ask one last question on a more personal note. So you're an MD, you're a PhD, a clinician, you've done research, you've been in academia. What drew you to the FDA and your job as a regulator? Because I think that's something that most of us in this room don't, yet appreciate, to Hubert's point also. What drew you to that, and what is it like to be that?
So I'll start with, first, obviously you heard me talk about mission, you talked about impact of mission. That's really what drew me. But I think when you look at, I made a decision on one device, so I'll give you an example, the Alzheimer's blood test device, right? A decision was made on that. You have opened the window for millions of people to get care and get a diagnosis earlier than they have been able to do before. That is transformative. You have that impact by being at the agency. You get to see every novel innovation. And with that comes responsibility, because you also see when things don't go right. And I can't always tell you what things didn't go right, but I can set policy to try to help prevent those things that didn't go right from happening again. That is incredibly, incredibly powerful agent to protect public health. And so I still see patients because I like that one-on-one interaction with people and caring for them and seeing the impact of when you help them. But I also like knowing that the decisions we make impact millions of people. And that is really the power of working at the FDA.
Wow. Thank you. Let's thank our speaker.